Hello. My name is Molly Marrow. They said I should be grateful. That selling my medical patent for $60,000, without asking me, was a favor. My mother smiled and said, "No need to thank us." They didn't just sell my work. They sold my name. My future. My place in the world. And I said nothing, until the FBI showed up at brunch. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd keep playing the obedient daughter. But what happens when the family that raised you decides your silence is more valuable than your voice? Would you let them get away with it? Or would you burn it all down, quietly? The rain in Portland has a way of whispering against windows, soft enough to make you feel safe yet sharp enough to remind you of everything you'd rather forget. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that afternoon, the drizzle had already turned the maple leaves into a carpet of red and gold. The house looked the same, white siding, the porch light glowing before the sun was even gone. I could smell roasted turkey from the street. It should have felt like coming home, but it didn't. Inside, warmth hit me like a wall. Candles burned on the mantel, cinnamon mixed with coffee and cranberry sauce. My mother, Drusilla, was giving orders before she even saw me, telling my brother to move the wine glasses, correcting my sister's laughter for being too loud. When she finally looked up, she gave me that quick smile people offer when they're checking you off a list. "Molly, good, you made it. Hang your coat in the laundry room, the closet's too full," she said without glancing twice. I nodded, letting the comment slide. I hadn't been home since spring, not because of distance, but because silence sometimes hurts less than pretending. I passed the hallway wall, the Marrow family of achievements. Their smiling faces framed in gold. Corwin in his white coat. Seraphine in a glossy photo from a women's leadership magazine. Dad with his retirement plaque. And where my picture once hung, there was a gap filled with a framed quote, "Success runs in our family." My chest tightened, but I smiled. That was my family, polished, proud, predictable. By 5, the guests began to arrive. Neighbors I barely recognized, an aunt who always whispered gossip loud enough for everyone to hear. I took my seat at the end of the table, half behind the candle centerpiece. The conversation was an orchestra of achievements, promotions, investments, house renovations. My voice didn't belong in that music. When Mom began her toast, her words flowed like a speech she had rehearsed. "To family," she started, glass raised high, "to perseverance and the Marrow way." Everyone echoed her. She moved down the table, announcing highlights. Corwin, saving lives at the hospital. Seraphine, making waves in corporate communications. And our youngest, Molly, she paused with that performative fondness, "She's doing some tech thing with computers. We're proud she still tries." A wave of laughter rippled across the table. Even Dad smiled awkwardly, looking down at his plate as if the potatoes could save him. I forced a polite grin and looked at my napkin. My hand stayed beneath the table, fingers pressed into my palm until they hurt. One of the guests, an older man I didn't know, leaned toward me. "You're the IT support, right? My company could use someone good with printers." "Yes," I said. One word. The safest choice. No one corrected him. Dinner stretched on. Conversations overlapped like competing talk shows. I caught my reflection in the silverware, distorted but clearer than any of their faces. Maybe that's what family does, shows you who you aren't. After dessert, when the smell of coffee filled the room, Mom clinked her spoon against her glass. The laughter quieted. "Before we wrap up," she announced, "I have something special to share." Her tone was bright, the kind she used when she'd outdone herself. My gut tightened. "Everyone here knows Molly has been working on some projects," she said, glancing toward me like she was doing me a favor. "Well, good news. We helped her make something useful. We sold one of her little inventions for $60,000. Applause. Actual applause. I froze, hearing my name tied to something I never approved. The room blurred as guests congratulated me, toasted her, snapped pictures. My stomach dropped. Seraphine leaned in with a smirk. "You should thank Mom for having business sense. Otherwise, those files would have just collected dust. What files? My voice cracked, quieter than I wanted. Mom beamed. Oh, don't be modest, sweetheart. The medical patent or whatever it was. You left the paperwork in your old room. We just handled the business part. Family teamwork. I couldn't breathe for a second. That's not possible, I managed. I never sold anything. The room went silent, air heavy. Dad cleared his throat, trying to lighten it. She's just surprised, that's all. Mom laughed, sharp, dismissive. Oh sweetheart, don't ruin the moment. Let people celebrate you for once. The moment stretched too long. Cameras flashed again. Everyone resumed their chatter as if nothing had cracked. But something had, something I'd been trying to keep whole for years. The evening drifted into forced laughter. I answered questions about what I'd do with the money, each lie tasting more bitter. By 9, guests wandered into the living room for coffee and pumpkin pie. I slipped out through the side door, into the drizzle. The air outside was cold, clean, real. I stood under the porch light, pulling my phone from my pocket. My thumb scrolled through emails from my lab, nothing unusual. Patent notification still marked secure. 2 weeks ago, everything had been fine. How could they have sold anything? Through the window, I saw my mother laughing, her hand resting proudly on Seraphine's shoulder. They looked like the cover of a magazine, success in human form. I used to want to belong in that frame. Now it felt like a cage. Maybe they didn't just sell my work. Maybe they sold a piece of me too. I walked to my car, rain tapping on the roof like small reminders not to forget this night. Sitting behind the wheel, I whispered, almost to myself, if they really touched my work, I'll find out. Sleep never came easy that night. I lay on the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling where the glow of the streetlight cut a thin gold line through the curtains. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It had that particular silence of people who believed they'd already won an argument you hadn't even started. I turned over, opened my phone, and watched the time crawl past 3 in the morning. When the first bit of gray light broke through the blinds, I gave up on pretending to rest. The air smelled faintly of coffee brewing downstairs. I sat up, rubbed my temples, and checked my email out of habit. The message popped up before I could even swipe away the notifications, subject line in bold red, unauthorized IP transfer detected, urgent action required. For a second I thought it had to be some kind of spam. Then I saw my own name in the body of the message. Dear Ms. Marrow, our records show a legal transfer of patent rights for your biomedical design to TechPoint VC as of yesterday, November 23rd. There was an attached document, my signature printed neatly under the sale amount, $60,000. My mouth went dry. The authorization date said 2016, referencing a continuing power of attorney. My chest tightened until it hurt. That was the year I let Mom help me close an old student loan. I whispered, barely audible, that document expired 6 years ago. I read the message twice, then a third time. Every line confirmed what I didn't want to believe. My fingers trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. I could feel the blood drain from my face as a kind of cold heat filled me. Betrayal has a temperature, icy on the skin, burning underneath. Downstairs, chairs scraped against tile. I could hear the soft clinking of plates, my mother humming an old church tune like it was any other morning. My stomach clenched. I pulled on a sweater, tried to breathe evenly, and walked down the hall. The kitchen was bathed in yellow morning light. Mom stood at the counter buttering toast, humming. Seraphine scrolled through her phone at the island, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, almond milk beside her. The smell of eggs filled the room. I placed my phone on the counter with the screen lit. Who signed this? Mom didn't even look up. We did. I blinked. You what? You left all those files in your old room, she said casually, sliding the toast onto a plate. Your father and I figured you'd be grateful we handled it. We've been cleaning up for months, and honestly, those papers were just collecting dust. Seraphine took a sip of her coffee, glancing up with that same smirk she used when she thought she was being clever. Mom said it was just sitting there. It's not like anyone else was going to buy it. My voice came out steadier than I expected. It wasn't yours to touch. That power of attorney expired years ago. Mom gave a short laugh. Molly, you used to let me sign school forms for you. It's the same thing. I stared at her. No, it's not. My throat felt tight, but my words were clear. That was 16 years ago. This is my work, my future. She finally turned to face me, annoyed by my persistence. Oh, come on. We're your family. We just made sure you didn't waste another 10 years chasing a fantasy. I couldn't respond right away. The air between us was heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Dad shuffled in just then, the newspaper under his arm. He smiled awkwardly. Morning, girls. Tell her the good news, Mom said brightly. The money hits Monday. After taxes, she'll get around $38,000. I looked at her, then at him. Do you even know what you sold? Seraphine flipped a page on her phone. Something with solar. Or medical stuff. You never explain things clearly, Molly. You never ask, I said quietly. Mom smoothed her sweater, her tone calm and cutting. We saved you from wasting more years on those little projects. You're welcome, Molly. No need to thank us. The world tilted slightly, like my body couldn't decide whether to fight or flee. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my expression didn't move. I stood there, watching the way sunlight fell across the counter, watching the knife she used to spread butter glint in the light. My life's work, reduced to $60,000 and a smile. I took a slow breath. You had no right. Mom sighed. You'll understand someday. Families make tough decisions. Seraphine looked up, her voice softer, falsely sweet. We did it because we love you. Love. They always used that word when they wanted to excuse something. I picked up my phone and walked out of the kitchen. My father muttered something about not making a scene, but I was already halfway down the hall. Outside, the air felt sharp against my skin. I stepped onto the porch, trying to breathe, trying to think. The neighborhood was still quiet, mist hovering over the lawns. I sat on the wooden step and pressed my palms together until they stopped shaking. My mind replayed her words, we saved you. Saved me from what? From being independent. From proving that my work mattered more than their small view of me. I pulled up my contact list and called my former professor, hoping for a lifeline. The call went straight to voicemail, disconnected. My second call, to my old attorney, rang twice before a recorded voice answered, mailbox full. I dropped the phone beside me and looked out at the trees. The fog made everything look softer, except the truth. They looked at something they didn't understand and decided it was worthless. And now they expected applause. I went back inside. The house smelled like coffee and control. I moved quietly up the stairs, back into the guest room, shutting the door behind me. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, the faint hum of the fan the only sound. I logged into the secure drive where I kept every file related to the patent, design drafts, correspondence, data models. I had labeled the folder Core Research. The icon blinked once before opening. Empty. My stomach dropped. I refreshed. Still empty. I checked the trash bin. Nothing. I stared at the blank window on the screen, my reflection faint in the glow. Someone had deleted it. A low sound escaped me, not a cry, more like disbelief pressed into a breath. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. Outside, I could hear faint laughter from downstairs, the clatter of dishes being washed, life continuing as if nothing had just ended upstairs. I stood and walked to the window. The drizzle had turned to steady rain, streaking the glass like gray ribbons. Somewhere between last night's toast and this morning's coffee, they had rewritten my story without permission. It wasn't the money. It was the choice. The way they looked at my life's work and decided they knew better. I touched the glass, cool under my fingers. "All right," I whispered. "If this is how they play, I'll learn the rules." Behind me, my laptop chimed softly, an auto-sync notification. The drive connected again, but the main folder stayed empty. I didn't panic. Not yet. I simply reached for my phone and opened a new note, typing every detail I could remember, the date of the email, the time I woke up, the look on my mother's face when she said no need to thank us. If they thought I'd just let this go, they'd forgotten who raised me to be relentless. It wasn't just the folder. Something else was missing. I stood motionless for a long moment, my eyes fixed on the blank screen, half hoping the files would magically reappear. The room around me, the childhood bedroom now filled with storage boxes and mismatched furniture, felt suddenly colder, like the air had shifted along with my understanding of everything. I closed the laptop gently, careful not to slam it. I didn't need noise. I needed clarity. My hands were still shaky, not from shock anymore, but from something deeper, recognition. Moving toward the dresser, I noticed something off about the top drawer. The little brass lock, once perfectly flush with the wood, had shifted, barely, but enough for me to catch it. That drawer had been closed the same way for over a decade, ever since I'd installed the lock after Seraphine borrowed one too many things. I pulled it open. The drawer was nearly empty now. My old journals, a few receipts, and beneath them the backup USB. Still in its silver case. It looked untouched. But I'd trusted appearances too many times lately. I plugged it into the laptop again. No password prompt. No familiar folder tree. Just empty. Like someone had gone through it methodically and wiped only what they needed to. No chaos. No accidental deletions. I took a long breath through my nose. Slow. Intentional. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I turned toward the closet and reached for a dusty cardboard box marked college. Most of it was junk, books I never planned to reread, old notebooks with doodles in the margins, and a few half-finished lab write-ups. But near the bottom, between a stack of spiral notebooks and a cracked calculator, I found something different. An envelope. Sealed. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and opened it slowly. Inside was a letter on thick paper, the kind only official institutions use. My heart skipped. National Biomedical Innovation Fund. Initial valuation notice, October 4th. I read the words over and over. After full technical review, your submitted concept has been preliminarily valued at $7.5 million. We are interested in exclusive licensing rights and would like to discuss terms at your convenience. I stopped reading. 6 weeks ago. 6. They had seen this. They had known. I remembered that envelope. I'd left it on the desk the day I returned from the conference in California. I'd been exhausted and optimistic all at once. I told my mother something big was coming. She smiled, handed me a cup of chamomile tea, and said, "Don't get your hopes up. You've said that before." That was her way of saying stop dreaming. I stared at the letter again, then folded it neatly and slid it into a new envelope. On the front, I wrote in clean block letters, just in case. Setting it aside, I reached for my phone. If I had any hope of reclaiming what was mine, I needed legal help, now. I scrolled through contacts, past familiar names I hadn't touched in years, and dialed the number for the university's legal clinic. Voicemail. I left a short message. Calm. Clear. I explained the situation. I gave my name, the patent number, the timeline, and told them I needed assistance regarding unauthorized transfer of intellectual property. I said the word fraud without flinching. When I hung up, I leaned against the wall. The room was quiet except for the hum of my laptop, still open beside me. They had known all along. They didn't stumble into this. They planned it. Found the files, read the letter, made the call. To them, I was a child playing scientist. To them, $60,000 was a miracle, not a theft. They didn't just sell my work. They stole my name. I pushed myself up from the floor and walked out of the room, my steps slow but sure. At the end of the hallway, I passed the closed door to the master bedroom. I didn't pause. I didn't knock. Instead, I walked downstairs and stepped outside. The air smelled of wet leaves and coffee that had gone cold. I sat on the porch swing, cradled the envelope in my lap, and opened the security camera app on my phone. The footage loaded quickly. 2 weeks ago, 11:42 p.m., motion detected. I watched as the front door opened softly. My mother stepped inside, still in her robe. She walked up the stairs, into my room, and left 20 minutes later holding something in her hand. The timestamp didn't lie. I didn't feel shock anymore. Just clarity. I rewound, replayed it twice, then saved the clip to my personal drive. Evidence. I didn't go back inside. I stayed there until the sky turned from gray to a muted orange. Birds chirped from the wires above. Somewhere inside, dishes clinked. The world moved on. But I didn't. I stood, returned to my room, and placed the just-in-case envelope into my laptop bag. Then I printed out a second copy of the valuation letter. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about dignity. About the fact that no one, not even my own mother, had the right to rewrite my story. Before the house stirred too much, I showered, dressed, and packed my things. I didn't plan to spend another night there. When I walked out the door, no one noticed. I found a cafe 2 blocks away. Ordered a black coffee. Sat by the window. The phone buzzed. One new message. We need to talk. Today. I looked at the name, Assistant Counsel, Oregon State IP Law Clinic. Finally. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, too strong. I didn't care. Because today, they'd hear my voice. The message came through while I was still sitting in the cafe, staring into my half-empty coffee cup. We need to talk. Today. I reread it 3 times before typing back, name a time. The reply came instantly. Noon. University Law Clinic. 4th floor. By the time I walked out into the drizzle again, the air felt heavier, colder. The traffic hummed faintly from the next block. I took a deep breath and started walking toward downtown. Every step felt like I was wading through old memories I didn't want, seminars I once attended, professors who called me brilliant but distracted, the way my mother's voice used to echo in my head telling me to get a real job. The university building smelled of rain and photocopier ink. Inside, the hallways gleamed with polished floors. The clinic office was small, lined with posters about fair use and startup law. A young man in a navy blazer greeted me with a firm handshake. Theo Reyes, he said. I reviewed your email. He motioned me toward a small table scattered with law textbooks and a coffee mug that said property is power. I handed him the folder I had prepared, the patent registration, copies of the sale contract, the hidden valuation letter, and a USB copy of the evidence. His eyebrows rose as he flipped through the pages. This is substantial, he said. You documented everything. I learned that lesson early, I answered. He nodded slowly. Then you've got a solid case. But, Molly, this will get ugly. Once we file a complaint, your family will be legally implicated. Are you prepared for that? For a moment, the word family tasted foreign. I looked down at the neat stack of papers between us. They stopped being just family when they became my thieves. He hesitated before saying, all right. I'll draft the initial motion tonight. You'll need to sign an affidavit. He paused, reading my expression. You're not alone in this, you know. Hope flickered, small, fragile, but real. For the first time since that awful Thanksgiving dinner, someone believed me. We spent an hour outlining steps, checking forms, clarifying details. When we finished, he stood to shake my hand again. We'll get through this, he said, his voice steady. But expect pushback. Outside, the clouds had lifted slightly. The streets glistened from rain, the air crisp. I checked my watch, almost 2. The bus stop was crowded, so I stood a little apart, pulling out my phone to check messages. That's when I saw it. A new text from an old friend, Lyra Penrose, my college lab partner. We hadn't spoken in months, not since she'd promised to connect me with investors. The preview line froze me. Hey, I didn't know things were that bad. I opened it fully. There was a screenshot attached of an email. We appreciate your interest in supporting Ms. Merrow's research, but her family informed us she's been under severe stress and struggling mentally. We hope she finds stability before taking on big responsibilities. Lyra's text followed, your mom called us weeks ago. She said you'd had some kind of breakdown. I didn't know what to believe. I'm sorry. My throat tightened. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. The bus came and went, I didn't move. She'd done it again. The sabotage wasn't about misunderstanding or control. It was deliberate. She didn't just steal my work, she stole the world's perception of me. I sank onto the cold metal bench. The wind blew damp against my face. How many times had I defended her, saying she just didn't understand me? How many doors had she quietly closed behind my back? I typed a short reply to Lyra, you believed her. Then deleted it before hitting send. I didn't have the energy to argue. Instead, I forwarded the screenshot to Theo with one line, new evidence. He wrote back 5 minutes later, this could qualify as defamation if we prove intent. Don't delete it. I locked my phone and closed my eyes. 3 years earlier, I'd stood on a stage beside Lyra, presenting our joint project to a room full of potential investors. I could still see my mother in the front row, arms crossed, a face expressionless. When I finished, she leaned over to a neighbor and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, she's brilliant, but she doesn't have the stomach for business. That comment haunted me for months. It made its way into gossip, into faculty talk. I thought she was just being careless. Now I knew better. It wasn't carelessness. It was control. That evening, I drove back to the house. The lights were on, and through the window, I could see Mom at the dining table sorting receipts. Dad sat at the end, reading his paper like a prop in a silent play. I entered quietly, placing my bag by the stairs. Rough day? Mom asked without looking up. I stood across from her, hands on the chair. You could say that. Dad glanced up over his glasses. We were just talking about how to handle the tax from the sale. Probably smart to invest it. I smiled without warmth. You already spent it, didn't you? Bought yourself another piece of reputation. Mom's eyes flicked up then, calm and cutting. Watch your tone. My tone. I let out a short laugh. You told my colleagues I'm mentally unstable. How's that for tone? She blinked, genuinely surprised I knew. I was protecting you. Investors can be ruthless. That's not protection. That's erasure. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Dad shifted uncomfortably, mumbling, let's not fight at dinner. There's nothing left to fight about, I said, turning toward the hallway. You already decided who I am. I walked upstairs, every step echoing. In the bathroom, I opened the cabinet, pulled out the printed valuation letter, and taped it inside the mirror. My reflection split between the paper and my face. That letter wasn't just proof of worth, it was proof of what they'd tried to bury. I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet settle. Then my phone buzzed. Theo, Molly, are you ready to take this public? If yes, I'll activate our motion first thing in the morning. I looked at the reflection of my mother's handwriting on an old birthday card still pinned to the mirror behind the letter. Love always, Mom. Sometimes love isn't a gift. Sometimes it's a weapon that looks like care until it cuts you clean open. I typed back one word. Yes. Theo's message stayed on my screen long after I read it. Molly, are you ready to take this public? I had already typed my reply before I let myself think twice, yes. I set the phone down, feeling my pulse steady in my wrist. There was no going back. That night stretched long and deliberate. I sat on the edge of the guest bed with my laptop open, the blue glow spilling over the walls. Every click felt heavier, more calculated. I went through everything: backups, drafts, emails, timestamps. Each file was a piece of the life I had built alone, the proof that I wasn't some lost daughter playing scientist. I printed out the patent registration, circled my name where it clearly read sole inventor. Then I added the transfer date and the note from TechPoint VC, stapled the expired power of attorney document beside it, and highlighted the signatures. My handwriting filled the margins, arrows, comments, reminders to cross-check. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger wastes energy. I was preparing for battle the way a surgeon prepares for an operation: calm, precise, unsentimental. By the time the clock hit midnight, the stack of papers beside me looked like a case file. I attached digital copies to an email and wrote the subject line: ready to go. Theo responded within minutes: received. I'll file in the morning. Try to rest. Rest. The word felt foreign. I shut off the lamp and sat there in the dark, listening to the faint hum of rain against the roof. My mind replayed every conversation I'd had with my mother that year, every polite insult disguised as concern, every moment she brushed me aside for being too emotional. All of it led here, to me, surrounded by documents, reclaiming what should never have been taken. When dawn finally slipped through the blinds, my eyes ached from sleeplessness, but my focus was razor-sharp. I checked my email again, mostly out of reflex, and saw the new message at the top of the inbox. From USPTO Enforcement Division. Subject: Transfer of Patent 11098374 flagged as unauthorized. My breath caught. I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Marrow, our review has determined that the transfer of patent 11098374 to TechPoint VC appears to have been executed under an invalid power of attorney. A legal investigation is being initiated. Please be available for contact. I stared at the words until they blurred. The line that had haunted me for weeks, "You have no proof," was now irrelevant. I had all the proof I needed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just exhaled, slow and measured, and whispered, "It's time." Downstairs, I could hear movement, the clinking of dishes, the low hum of my mother's radio in the kitchen. I tucked the email printout into a manila folder and walked toward the noise. She was arranging flowers on the table, humming to herself, the image of domestic calm. "You're up early," she said without turning around. "Mom," I said evenly, "we need to talk." Her hands paused mid-arrangement. "Can it wait? I'm trying to get this ready for tomorrow's brunch." "No," I said, stepping closer. "It can't." I placed the folder on the counter. The sharp clap of paper against granite made her flinch. "That's a legal notice," I said. "The patent transfer was illegal. I'm giving you one chance to retract it before it goes public." She finally looked at me, eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "You used a document that expired 6 years ago to sell my work. That's fraud." My father, hearing the tone, entered from the hallway, still in his robe. "What's going on?" "It was a misunderstanding," he said automatically, before even asking. Seraphine wandered in, phone in hand, her expression already tired of the drama. "Oh my God, Molly, are we doing this again? You're overreacting. We helped you. You forged my future," I said. "And handed it to a predator." "That's ridiculous," Mom snapped. "You think I'd risk everything for $60,000? You already did." The room went still. Dad stepped forward, palms raised. "Let's all calm down. We're family. Families don't falsify signatures." I turned to him. "You let her. You watched." He looked away. "Your mother said it was harmless." "Harmless. That word again." I pointed to the folder. "It's not harmless. It's a federal offense. The USPTO confirmed it this morning. They're launching an investigation. Seraphine laughed nervously. You're bluffing. I took out the printed email, slid it across the table. Read it. She skimmed the first few lines before her smirk faltered. Mom snatched the paper from her hand, scanning it quickly. The color drained from her face. You went to the government? She asked, disbelief turning sharp. I went to the truth, I said. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Mom's jaw tightened. You're destroying this family over paperwork. No, I said quietly. You destroyed it when you decided my work was yours to sell. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She turned away, adjusting a vase that didn't need adjusting. The flowers wobbled in their glass cylinder, just like every excuse she'd ever made. I waited, giving her one last chance to speak, to apologize, to show anything human, but she stayed silent. The silence said everything. I gathered the folder, holding it against my chest. You still think this is about money, I said softly. It's not. I'm taking my name back. Seraphine scoffed. You're so dramatic, Molly. You could have just let Mom handle it. Exactly, I said. That's the problem. I turned toward the door, my voice steady. This was your warning. Next time, it won't be in this house. Outside, the air felt almost kind. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the smell of wet cedar in the air. I walked to my car, opened the driver's door, and sat there for a long moment before pulling out my phone. My fingers hovered above the screen for just a second, then I typed, "Go ahead." Theo's reply arrived almost instantly. I've submitted the motion. Get ready. They're not going to take this lightly. I rested the phone on the passenger seat and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It sounded like control. Theo's last message echoed in my head as I sat in my car outside the house. Get ready. They're not going to take this lightly. He was right. People like my mother never surrendered quietly. They controlled by pretending chaos didn't exist, by forcing the world to believe their version of peace. But I wasn't their silent daughter anymore. That night, I went through my email archives and cloud folders one more time. Theo wanted every possible piece of evidence, photos, voice memos, video clips, anything. It felt tedious, but necessary. Somewhere inside all that digital clutter, I hoped there might be one more piece of proof strong enough to silence the disbelief that still lingered around my name. At 2 a.m, I found it. A folder automatically backed up to my university cloud drive, one I hadn't opened in months. The timestamp showed the same week as the family dinner before Thanksgiving. I clicked play on the only video inside. The image was dark, grainy, recorded from someone's phone at the table. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, and then, her voice. My mother's voice. It was such a mess of numbers and graphs, she was saying to one of her friends. I rewrote parts of it myself before we sold it. The woman she spoke to responded with a casual, "You're brilliant, Drew. Maybe you should have been the inventor." My mother laughed. That light, brittle laugh she always used when she wanted the world to see her as both humble and superior. I sat there frozen, replaying the words. I played the clip again, until I could recite every inflection, every smug tone. She hadn't just sold my patent, she'd rewritten the story so completely that she believed it. My hands were trembling when I copied the file and sent it to Theo. My message was short, "Found this. Timestamp attached." He replied a few minutes later even though it was nearly 3 a.m, "This changes everything. That's intentional fraud, Molly. Keep it secure. I'll archive a copy in our case system." I stared at the message and whispered, "She really thinks she's the hero of this story." The next morning came too soon. My phone buzzed before I'd even poured my coffee. A new email, an invitation to a symposium from a medical organization I used to collaborate with. The subject line mentioned, "Advances in Biotech and Renewable Energy Systems." For a moment I thought it was a coincidence, maybe someone had forwarded my old work. Then curiosity took over. I clicked the attached video link. The camera panned across a stage where professionals in suits sat behind a banner. And there, under the bright lights, stood Seraphine. My sister. My stomach clenched. The caption below the video read, Seraphine Marrow, co-founder, Solar Med Initiative. Co-founder. I turned the volume up, barely breathing. She was speaking confidently, animated, everything our mother trained us to be. My sister had the early idea, she said, voice measured, perfectly casual. But I translated it into something real. The audience laughed softly, admiringly. Cameras flashed. She smiled like she deserved every bit of that attention. I closed the laptop lid slowly and leaned back, pressing my fingertips against my temples. They'd erased me again, but this time, publicly. The anger that followed wasn't loud. It was cold, clean, steady. The kind of anger that could burn for years without dying out. I called Theo. I need to show you something. He didn't even let me finish describing it before saying, forward the link. I'll handle the takedown. Within hours, an emergency cease and desist order went to the symposium board. By late afternoon, the video vanished from their site, replaced with a generic apology banner. My name was reinstated as the inventor. But of course, my family didn't leave it there. That evening, Seraphine went live on social media. Her tone was perfectly rehearsed. There's been a misunderstanding, she said sweetly to the camera. I never meant to take credit for my sister's work. It's just been such a stressful time for our family. I watched her blinking through false tears. She was good, too good. Comments poured in with sympathy. My phone buzzed again. A private message from her. I was trying to protect our image, she wrote. You always want to burn everything down. I was saving you from yourself. I stared at her words until I felt that same chill creep up my neck. My fingers hovered over the screen, then typed my reply, you stole my voice. Now you'll hear me louder than ever. I hit send and closed the phone. By nightfall, Theo called again. The USPTO escalated our complaint, he said. They're opening a federal inquiry, fraud, forgery, and defamation. You're officially the complainant. For a moment, silence filled the room. Official. That word carried weight. It meant this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was law. I turned in my chair, glancing at the folders stacked neatly on my desk. I began packing them into my leather briefcase, every printout, every letter, every timestamp. I labeled the top file for court. Somewhere between the first folder and the last, I felt something inside me settle. Not joy, not relief, just certainty. By the time I zipped the briefcase shut, the sky had turned dark. The lamp cast a golden circle over the desk, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. My phone buzzed one more time. A new email notification. From Office of Federal Enforcement. Subject, witness interview scheduling. Body, FBI field agents are coordinating arrival for formal witness interview. I stared at the line until the words became real. It was happening. Outside, the rain began again, soft but insistent. I could hear my mother's voice in memory, laughing at that dinner party, bragging about rewriting my work. For the first time, it didn't make me feel small. It made me ready. I stood, grabbed the briefcase, and turned off the lamp. In the dark reflection of the window, I could almost see the younger version of myself, the girl who stayed quiet to keep the peace. She was gone now. I whispered to the empty room, you wanted control. Now you'll face consequence. Not yet, I said to the reporter, my voice even but not cold. The camera's red light blinked as I stared directly into the lens. I didn't flinch. That moment felt like standing on the edge of a canyon, wind rushing up from below, the whole world watching to see if you'll fall or fly. But let me go back an hour. The house buzzed with activity that morning. The post-Thanksgiving brunch had become something of a tradition in our family, a way for my mother to show off our curated normalcy after everyone had already seen the mess that Thanksgiving usually became. She always said it was to open our hearts and our leftovers, but we all knew it was about faces, who showed up, who dressed well, who brought what dish, and who got mentioned in the blessing. I arrived late on purpose. I didn't bring anything but my small black purse and a quart folder inside it. I wore jeans, a gray blazer, and no makeup. It wasn't protest, it was strategy. When I walked in, the house smelled like orange rolls, sausage quiche, and ego. Guests were laughing politely in the living room, their plates balanced on knees. My brother Corwin was cornered by a retired nurse asking about her sciatica. Seraphine floated between groups, sipping mimosa with the grace of someone who'd never cleaned up her own mess. My mother was near the fireplace, making her opening remarks. "Family is everything," she said, holding a glass like she was giving a toast. "We lift each other up. That's what we've always done. That's what we'll always do." Then came the knock. Not loud. Not frantic. Just two simple, measured taps. The room hushed instantly. My mother paused, confused. "Did we invite more guests?" she joked. The door opened, and two men in windbreakers stepped inside, flanked by a woman holding a clipboard and wearing a badge clipped to her blazer. "Drusilla Hart Marrow?" the taller agent asked. "Malcolm Trent Marrow." My parents froze. "Yes," my mother said slowly, eyes narrowing. "I'm Special Agent Rhodes. This is Agent McRae, with the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. This is Officer Patel from the USPTO Enforcement Bureau. We're here pursuant to Federal Investigation Case 227A regarding wire fraud, forgery, and intellectual property theft." The silence that followed was so sharp, I swear it split the air. Seraphine gasped audibly. My father blinked and said, "There must be some mistake. We have a warrant to search the premises and take both parties into custody for questioning," Officer Patel continued. "You are not under arrest at this time, but you are required to comply." My mother stepped back. "I'm her mother. This is a misunderstanding, she's confused." The agents ignored her plea. One motion toward the folder in my hand. "Ms. Marrow, do you have the original documents?" I handed it over without a word. The camera flashes began a few seconds later. Someone had tipped off the press, Theo, most likely. It wasn't spiteful. It was tactical. "Ms. Marrow," one of the reporters called from outside, raising her voice above the commotion, "is it true your parents sold your patent without permission?" "Is it true they forged your signature?" another added. Cameras pointed in every direction. Neighbors peeked out their doors. My cousin Judith stood holding a tray of muffins, completely frozen. I watched it all quietly. Not smiling. Not smug. Just finally seen. Drusilla protested as they led her toward the door. "You have no idea what she's doing. She's unstable. She's trying to ruin this family." "Funny," I said softly, almost to myself, "I thought you already handled that." Seraphine brushed past me, her voice low. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "No," I replied. "But you made sure the lies did." Corwin stood near the stairs, speechless. For once, the eldest child didn't have anything clever to say. As they placed my parents into the unmarked vehicle, a news anchor with perfect hair and a microphone stepped closer. "Ms. Marrow, do you feel justice was served today?" I turned to the camera, leveled my gaze, and answered without blinking. "Not yet." They wanted a quote. I gave them the truth. Later that afternoon, the crowd dispersed. The reporters packed up, neighbors retreated, and the leftover food sat untouched on the buffet table. I stepped back inside to gather my things. The house no longer felt like a home, it felt like a set where the final act had just ended. Seraphine found me in the hallway, looking more shaken than I'd ever seen her. "I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. "You stood on that stage and called yourself the co-founder," I replied. "It was already too far." She swallowed hard. I panicked. "Mom said if we didn't make it look like a family project, people wouldn't take it seriously." "You mean they wouldn't take me seriously," I corrected. She looked down. "I'm sorry, Molly." I almost believed her. But apologies are like patches, they don't hold if the foundation is cracked. Apologies don't fix broken blueprints, I said. Only truth does. She nodded, eyes glassy. I didn't stay to see if she cried. On my way out, I passed the fireplace again. The family portrait still hung above the mantel, me, cropped awkwardly at the end, shoulders turned slightly out of frame. Let them keep that version. I had my own now. Outside, the wind picked up. I walked slowly to my car, the weight of everything behind me starting to lift. I wasn't done. But I wasn't hidden anymore. The camera lights had long faded, but the heat of the question stayed with me. Do you feel justice was served? I'd said, not yet. 3 days later, I was back in my apartment, still wiping down surfaces that didn't need cleaning and checking emails I'd already read. That question kept echoing, not as doubt, but as a challenge. What does justice really look like when the people who broke you share your last name? My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. Dr. Marrow. This is Dana Morelli, legal counsel for SolarGen. Her voice was clear and professional. We've been following the news closely. Our board had previously paused discussions after complications, but we'd like to resume them now. If you're still open to licensing, we're prepared to sign. I felt my knees weaken, but I stayed standing. What changed? I asked. The public now knows the truth. And frankly, the science speaks for itself. We scheduled a meeting for the next morning. I ended the call, placed the phone down, and sat at my kitchen table in complete silence. This was the moment I'd imagined hundreds of times, except I'd always thought I'd share it with someone. Instead, it was just me and a sticky note on the fridge reminding me to buy coffee. The next day, I walked into a minimalist law office downtown. Concrete walls, abstract art, glass doors. Theo was already there, seated at the end of a long table beside 2 well-dressed lawyers from SolarGen. He stood when he saw me. You ready? I nodded, slid into the seat, and opened the folder I had brought. They slid the contract toward me, 30 pages, every line already reviewed. I picked up the pen, hesitated for a brief second, then signed. Dr. Molly L. Marrow, sole inventor. When I finished, I looked down at my name. Not the one they tried to erase. Not the daughter version. Not the one cropped out of family photos or left off of resumes. Mine. Fully. Theo smiled slightly. Congratulations. You just signed a 7-figure future. I looked back at the paper. They stole my silence, I said quietly. Now, I speak through every patient this invention helps. And I meant it. This wasn't just a win on paper. It was a restoration. A few days later, I got a call from the county detention center. Drusilla had requested to speak with me before her formal indictment. I didn't go in. Instead, I wrote a letter, short, direct, final. I handed it to the guard at the front desk and asked that it be delivered with no return reply. Inside the envelope was a single sentence. You taught me how to be silent. I learned to speak anyway. I walked out of the building without looking back. Back home, the air felt different. Lighter. Like I could finally exhale without apology. I turned on music, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. The headlines were still circulating. Seraphine had been dropped from 2 corporate speaking engagements. Corwin had issued a public statement citing emotional exhaustion and was taking an indefinite leave from his hospital board seat. None of it brought me joy. Vindication is a quiet thing when you've already buried the parts of yourself that needed approval. Instead of scrolling further, I opened a new document titled Legacy Fund. I wrote out a mission statement, built a framework, and listed names of young women I'd mentored over the past few years. Most of them were Black, Latina, or from underfunded school districts. Brilliant minds who'd been told their ideas were too complex or not practical enough. The first scholarship I created was named after the only person who ever looked at me and said, "Go bigger." The Thomas Lynette Memorial Grant. Thomas wasn't blood, but he was the first man who told me I didn't need permission to matter. My foster father, gone too soon, but never gone from me. I drove out to his grave 2 days later. It was drizzling again, Portland's version of a private moment. I brought with me a copy of the licensing agreement. I placed it beside his headstone, pressed flat so it wouldn't blow away. They never saw me, I whispered, fingers grazing the wet stone. But you did. This is ours. There were no tears. Just warmth. A quiet closeness I hadn't felt in years. When I got back to my car, Theo's name lit up my phone. Media wants to know if you'll speak publicly. Should I confirm? I stared at the screen for a long time. I had spoken through court documents, through signed contracts, through every step of reclaiming what they tried to steal. But I hadn't spoken with my voice, not yet. And maybe now was the time. I didn't reply to Theo's message right away. I read it 3 times, then placed the phone face down on the table beside a cold cup of tea. Outside my window, the street was quiet, a rare lull between buses. I sat still in that silence, trying to understand whether it felt like peace or just a pause. Media wants to know if you'll speak publicly. Should I confirm? What I wanted was to breathe, not perform. What I wanted wasn't applause, it was clarity. And maybe that's the difference between truth and revenge. One begs to be seen, the other just needs to exist. Several weeks passed after the arrests. Headlines came and went, replaced by newer scandals. Social media moved on. But I didn't. I didn't move forward either, not exactly. I moved inward. One rainy morning, I pulled open the drawer in my home office to look for a pen and instead found the notebook. Spiral-bound, the pages were yellowing at the edges, but the handwriting on the inside cover was still as clear as the first time I read it. Molly has something in her the world won't understand. Let them try, she'll keep going anyway. Thomas Lynette. My foster dad. The only adult who ever looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're already enough." He used to sit with me at the kitchen table while I built models out of plastic and glue. Everyone else told me to go outside. He handed me more batteries. I used to think his belief in me was kindness. Now I know it was vision. I flipped through the pages. Notes from high school science fairs. Sketches for the prototype. A picture he drew of me with safety goggles and the caption, "Boss Lady." It was a child's keepsake. It was also an archive of everything that mattered. The world eventually saw what he had always seen. But he'd never see the world see it. I closed the notebook and held it to my chest. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. A few days later, I received an email from Seraphine. Subject, Mom's funeral. Message, it's this Thursday. You don't have to say anything. I just thought you should know. I didn't reply. That Thursday morning, while black cars lined the street outside the funeral home, I walked along the river trail near my apartment. The air was damp, the path quiet. I carried a small envelope in my coat pocket, sealed and addressed to the funeral director. I had dropped it off earlier that morning, with clear instructions, place it in the casket. Nothing else. No explanations. Inside the envelope was a photograph, me and Thomas at my first science fair. He's crouched beside me, pointing proudly at my little cardboard solar panel. I'm 7, grinning with missing teeth and a mess of hair in a ponytail. He looks like a man who already knows I'm going to change the world. The note attached read, "Bury her with this, the one thing she couldn't take from me." It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't forgiveness either. It was truth. I didn't need to stand over her casket. I didn't need a seat in the front row or a chance to be heard. Some stories don't need retelling. Some are better left folded into the quiet. Instead, I returned home and opened my laptop. The foundation was live now. The Molly Lynette STEM Fund had its first board meeting the week prior. Our mission, mentorship, opportunity, and ownership. No one's name gets erased. Ever. The first scholarship went to a black girl from rural Mississippi who built a water filtration device out of scrap parts and won her state science fair. I mailed her acceptance letter myself, along with a note that read, "No one gets to decide your worth for you. Build everything they told you wasn't yours." I avoided cameras. No press releases. No TV spots. When Theo offered a press statement, I told him simply, make sure the right names are on the right credits. That's all. The news cycle had moved on, but the real change didn't live on headlines. It lived in names correctly listed under inventions. It lived in who got funded, who got published, who got believed. Weeks later, I visited the lab I helped fund through licensing. It was bright, spacious, with walls lined with student projects. One of the rooms bore my name, Marrow Innovation Studio, but I never pointed it out. A girl, maybe 15, tapped me on the shoulder while I observed her code running on a tablet. "How did you get here?" she asked. I smiled. "Not big, just enough." "They tried to write me out," I said. "But I rewrote the ending." The light in her eyes told me she understood. Maybe not everything, but enough. Later, sitting alone at my desk, I wrote the final line in my journal. "Some scars you don't hide. You wear them like patents, to prove you built something no one could take." Sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people who shared your dinner table, raised you, and called it love. This story wasn't just about a stolen patent. It was about reclaiming identity, choosing truth over silence, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away without hate, but with clarity. What would you do if your own family treated your life's work like it was theirs to sell? If stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe for more true life inspired stories that hit close to home.